All right. Today for the interview, I'm joined by Alvaro Saar Rios, a Texican playwright currently based in Chicago, who prioritizes his work on theater making and education. He's currently teaching playwriting and theater at University of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and his play Luchadora, Carmela Full of Wishes, and On the Wings of Mariposa all won the Distinguished Play Award from the American Alliance of Theater for Theater and Education. Rios has proven time and time again that he loves creating plays for multi-generational audiences all across the country, and we are so lucky to have him here. Alvaro, how are you?
Justin, I am great and very grateful to be here on this podcast and be able to talk to you. And thank you for this opportunity.
No, of course. Oh my gosh, our scheduler Leah was sending me all these playwrights and was sending me like some of their plays and stuff like that. And I was reading through your stuff, and it was like you have some of the most creative plays I've ever read. It's bananas. It leads me into my first question because I wanted to talk to you. Like, it's so creative from like adaptations about like reliving your grandmother's memories through her old scarf, or like to like a birthday themed hero's journey in Carmela Full of Wishes. Like, when you start a project, what do you let inspire you? Or like maybe like what do you find yourself looking for or like finding inspiration in when you're starting a play? Because so many of your pieces, a lot that I want to talk about today, are just so fantastical and creative. And I don't know, in a world where so many movies and stuff are getting put onto the stage, which is very cool, and adaptations and all of that work, which is so dope, you don't see a ton of these like even your adaptation work is so creative and fantastical. What inspires you when you're finding a new piece?
Wow, thank you for that question. So there are lots of things that definitely inspire me. I mean, I read a lot. I probably read way more. I probably would write more plays if I wouldn't read as much as I do. And it's from middle grade fiction to teen fiction to just regular old novels. But I also a lot of times I even pull from my own experiences. I've been
Yeah.
fortunate to live a various life from being a driving tanks in the army to being I was a singer in a death metal band in
I
high
literally
school.
I was doing research on you, and I have notes down here under my question saying, "Ask him about being a singer in a death metal band."
Yeah, so I was a singer in a death metal band for all throughout my high school years.
Wild.
I was I don't usually tell this, but I'll tell this. I was a contestant on Wheel of Fortune.
No, you weren't.
Um,
Really?
I was,
That's
um,
amazing.
and and various things in between. I used to usher for Cirque du Soleil when they would come to Houston every summer.
Oh,
Um, and so I pull from all my various experiences, which is I think important when it comes to, especially you mentioned the place that you referenced, Carmela Full of Wishes and On the Wings of Mariposa. They are adaptations, and in order for me to take on, especially a project like that, and when it comes to adapting, is I feel like you've got to find your way in, and for me, my way in is definitely has to be some sort of personal connection.
yeah.
That's the only way I'll usually take on an adaptation is if I can find a personal connection with it. It's going to be my adaptation, so it's my story too
Yeah.
now. And in order, and I want when people watch it, I think the more authentic I am in terms of connecting with my own personal experience, I'm hoping that whoever watches it will definitely be able to connect in their own way, even if it's about specifically about such as On the Wings of Mariposa, about Day of the Dead, and maybe this experience that maybe some who have
Mhm.
never grown up with, but possibly aware of because of the movie that came out that associated with it. Um, but I want them to connect on a deeper level in terms of the characters and
Yeah.
maybe even find their own similarities. So a lot of it is just pulling from my various experiences. So not specifically making it where a character oh, mom was on the Wheel of Fortune, or my brother is in a death metal band, but pulling from those very experiences that I got doing those things,
Yeah.
um, and finding my way into telling the story authentically and genuinely. People are investing their time and seeing my work. Obviously some get done at schools, and obviously it's a great opportunity for when students get it, but even when the public performances, people are investing their time and money, and I want them to be able to connect with it in a way
Yeah.
that maybe even they didn't even expect. And
No,
so
absolutely. I mean, when I read when I read your plays, especially, and I can't wait to talk about Luchadora because I'm a huge wrestling fan. I'm so excited. But when I read all of your work, even some, I went onto your new play exchange and I was doing some like light stalking over there too, and I was like reading through everything. Your characters have such like a vast array of backstory, but I feel like you give so much work to each one to give each actor playing those characters a like true arc and like an ability to really like dive in and bite something off, which is so interesting. You brought it up like you write a lot of work for younger audiences or more to be enjoyed by all ages. What do you like? Is there anything you do or you try to do with a script when you know like you're writing it for a younger audience, or even you're writing it with the idea that like a younger person is in the leading role of this? Because a lot of your shows have like a is like a coming of age story, or is like a younger age, like a teenager or something in the central point. Is there anything you do specifically when you know you're writing for that audience or that actor?
um, I don't think I don't think I set out to, other than the fact that I want to make sure that when I create this piece, definitely knowing that young audiences are going to see it, either in schools or or either either it's a touring production that comes to their schools, or they come and
Yeah,
attend the theater. Um, I My goal is always to try and put something in there that they didn't expect to see,
yeah,
um, because I mean I feel like that's really definitely been part of it. Because I think in terms of no matter what you think you're going to see in terms of the title, because the title is really all the students might even know, um,
hmm,
but I want to bring them in there so that maybe they might even expect it to be a certain way. But I really focus on, like, let's make this something that they're going to remember and maybe even not expect, and hopefully even something that will be where it connects to them in a way that they might rethink their idea of theater. Because
yeah,
maybe, who knows what kind of theater um, some of these students have been exposed to. And so, and also not even just the students, the teachers.
yeah,
I mean, because teachers are in the audience, and this is why I really specifically harp on saying that I write for multi generational audiences. Because I when I was first getting into writing for theater for young audiences, I saw many plays where it was easy for the adults to check out, and
yeah,
I've realized that was a missed opportunity to be able to connect with everyone in the room and not just the young people.
hmm.
And so my goal is always to even I want to connect with those teachers, because they're the ones who are also making the decisions on which place to go
What
see,
shows
right?
to do? Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And so I want to connect with them, and I want to believe that they have lived some sort of life. They have moms, they have dads, they have brothers and sisters
yeah,
too.
absolutely.
And maybe I can tug at their heartstrings in a way that they're gonna want to go, and it's like, what, I when maybe Alvaro Saar Rios, go see another play written by him. And I've been very fortunate that I've had people come up to me and say, what, I don't usually go see theater, um, but I will see anything you write. And for me, like, that's, I think
That's
how
such a
you
great comp.
change. That's
That's
how you
awesome.
change theater, right? Because
Yeah,
ultimately, what you're doing is you're connecting to people who maybe even didn't feel like theater was for them, or that whatever they were being exposed to wasn't something they personally connected to.
yeah,
um, and so that's, I mean, that's really what I want to set it out. I mean, I'm glad you said that, something about where in terms of creating these roles that people would want to perform. And I mean, Jose Rivera, one of my playwrights who I look up to,
oh
he
yeah,
said, you got to write those roles that performers would kill to die, to play,
hmm,
and I want to do that. And specifically, a lot of my characters are Latinx,
yeah,
um, and I that's kind of that's who I also want to write for, too, because I want I mean, that we're a part of American theater as anyone else, and so I figure
absolutely.
those are my goals whenever trying to
Yeah,
create these characters.
that's amazing. And here, I'm gonna go out of order a little bit because this was gonna be my final question, but I just can't keep it in anymore
Sure,
because
sure.
I wanted to. You brought up how like one of the things you like to bring in. I love the idea of like keeping teachers in mind too when you're writing theater. When you know it might be going into schools and stuff like that, because they are there, and it is easy sometimes for a teacher to check out when they bring their student on a field trip or something like that. So writing something that can be enjoyed by all of them is so interesting. But you and it's so smart. But you brought up showing something on stage that people wouldn't expect, and I don't think there's a better example of that than Luchadora. Can you I'm a huge wrestling fan. I read this play and I lost my mind. Can you tell me about this play and where it came from and how the journey has been since like it's gone up?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So Luchadora, I mean, it was inspired by many different things, but
Mhm.
one of the things that was inspired by was as a kid, I would watch wrestling with my grandmother,
Yeah.
and she loved it more than I would. Like she would really get into it, and there were times where like I would be doing things and she would remind me like, hey, you know what, it's about to come on, and so I would watch it with her. But I didn't have, being that young, I never thought to ask her why she loved it so much. And I started when I was in graduate school and I was thinking about different play ideas, like what I wanted to write about. I was thinking about, um, usually sometimes when I come up with play ideas, I always ask myself, what if? And so I think about these various different things.
Yeah.
And I say, what if the reason why my grandmother liked wrestling was because she was a wrestler. She just never told anyone in the
That's
family.
awesome.
And you think about it in terms of, especially in terms of, the Latino culture where,
Yeah.
secrets are a big thing.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what if she's just, held on to this secret, forever? Even like, some people reveal secrets deathbed. Not even then, she's not going to reveal it. Um, and so I thought about that. And as I was thinking about that, I was also had already been thinking about how can I adapt the Chinese folktale Hua Mulan,
Mhm.
um, and but do it in a way that that to make it my own.
Yeah.
How can I do that? And so it was around that time I was also thinking about that one, which was another idea, and I was like, oh, well, what if we set it in the world of lucha libre, and it's this grandmother who tells this story, which then we go back into the late 60s and we hear her journey into being a luchadora and why she
Yeah.
became one, and it wasn't out of the love for being a wrestler, it was out of the love for her father. But then also we get to learn about her father, who's very machismo, who also has his own secrets.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that play was commissioned for by First Stage in Milwaukee.
Mhm.
It was my second commission for them, and I actually the role of the mask maker, which is one of the favorite roles that many people love to play. I actually wrote for my wife,
Oh, that's
because
awesome.
it was definitely something, out of our aesthetic of like creating. She and I had our own performance troupe when we first started, and had this aesthetic of like you create your own work, you tell tell those stories that you want to see on the American
Mhm.
stage, and also sometimes even create roles for ourselves, and I say ourselves because I don't perform anymore, but I used to. Um, and I knew that she would be able to do a fabulous job as the mask maker. And so thankfully that piece has been done all over the country, was even
Yeah.
done in English in Mexico City, which
That's
really
awesome.
blew my mind. And and now I've actually created a what I call the Battle in Seattle version, which is that's a pretty big cast. But
Yeah.
now there's a 7-person version that I created,
Oh, that's awesome.
that is now being done at Seattle Children's Theater, um, to kind of give it more, for I guess I don't know, give it more access, but also to kind of, because I think for obviously, I mean, this play gets done by various schools and everything, but it's
Yeah.
also I also hope that it gets picked up by some of the other theaters, and so it's like, maybe this is another way to kind of re-envision it with a
Yeah.
smaller cast. But yeah, all over Texas this play gets done. It's been done in pockets in Oregon,
Ah, that's so awesome.
Washington,
What's it have you
California.
I'm sure you've been to at least, the production in Milwaukee or maybe a couple. What's it like when you see an audience member walk into a theater that has the ropes? and the wrestling ring on the stage. Like, what's it like to when the audience experiences that for the first time?
Oh man, it's such a joy. And what's cool too is because sometimes my play is the first time some of these kids have ever seen a play before.
Yeah.
And it's like that's also how you change theater, right? You change the expectation of the first time you see a play, you will never forget that. And now you're
Yeah.
seeing this play where, it's got lucha libre, which is pure theater. I mean,
Awesome.
wrestling is theater, right? Um, and it's this awesome story about this young woman who decides to put on a mask and
That's so
trains to
cool.
be a luchador, but it's a story about a strong young woman, which is, I think, I think we do need to see more in theater, and definitely
Yeah.
especially in terms of but also and not just that, but also in hopes that it's something that also that even those who don't identify as female will be able to connect to,
Yeah.
because I think sometimes when we see the protagonist who is usually a boy, we see that sometimes as universal. But then when we see some of the stories where the protagonist is a female, identifies as a girl, sometimes it gets marketed as a girl play, or that it's only girls need to go see
Yeah.
that. But not with Luchadora. I mean, I have
Mhm.
all kinds of fans coming out of that play, and thankfully that door has opened. That play opened the door for me to where yeah, I mean, I continue to realize, like, I mean, there are various aspects of the Latinx community that should be celebrated, and in
Yeah.
all its complexities, and can be done in a way where, like I said, it's multi-generational. I mean, specifically why I took on Dia de los Muertos was because, for On the Wings of a Mariposa, because I knew, I mean, that narrative is being told a specific way uh, through Disney's Coco, but
Mhm.
that's not the only narrative. And
Yeah.
so I felt like, how can I be able to do that in a way that continues to bring in a different aspect, which is obviously another part of the culture of many here in the United States. Many
Absolutely.
Americans experience this,
Yeah.
and
No,
but
I wanted to
also.
talk about that too, because On the Wings of a Mariposa was so fantastical and fun and playful. Did it come out at the same time or around the same time as like Coco?
No, I think we came out a couple. Oh, I honestly think we came out like a year after. We had been development way
Yeah.
before it, but I don't know. They've obviously probably were in development a lot longer, um, yeah, I think we
Well,
came out like a year after or something.
yeah. What's it like to take on to adapt something that is like much more widely known? Especially, I mean, with Coco having come out a year before, um, what was it like to kind of like take on this piece? I know you were developing it probably even before you heard of Coco, but
Mhm.
in the sense of like something that is so in the zeitgeist and so in the mainstream, and you took it and did something completely different with it. Talk about like the process of On the Wings of a Mariposa and stuff.
Sure, yeah. So that was same thing. That was adapted from a book by a Wisconsin author, Barbara Jose, and
Mhm.
I actually um, part of this process of adaptation, when I get to work with writers who are living, I try and first connect with them to find out
Yeah,
what their impulse was into creating it. I mean, I feel like
yeah,
it's for anyone. I mean, for me, when I create, like I said, my explanation for luchadora is like there's this impulse, like what was it inspired it. I want to find that first, um, and same thing, finding my way in. Part of it was finding my way in, and the way my way in was what you brought up, where the moment where the young girl uses her grandmother's rebozo, her shawl,
yeah,
to relive these memories of her grandmother. And that
yeah,
came to me when I was working on the play, around the time my mother-in-law came to visit our family, and she'd stayed for a week. And then after she left, I noticed that my son, whenever he's out of school, he would get his toys and he would go up to the guest room and he would play in the room, and he would do that day after day. And one time I asked him, I was like, why are you playing in here? And he said, because it smells like Mavel. That's like um uh, that's what he calls his grandmother.
yeah,
And so he says it smells like grandma. And so I started thinking about that in terms of scent, and and how
It's
the
such
power
an
of scent
yeah.
and how it can bring memories to us.
Mhm.
And I was like, this is my way in. That's
It was an amazing device. I loved reading it. It was so cool.
and yeah, and so and but it was also an opportunity for me to work with Dinora Marquez, who is this amazing musician composer in Milwaukee, who
Mhm.
has created this Latino arts strings program. um, and I mean, there's just a I mean, number one, there's certain people who you meet and you're just like, I would love to just find an opportunity to be able to work with this
Yeah,
person. And
absolutely.
she's one of those persons who I'd seen her work for many years. I'm like, I would just love to work with her. So this was an exciting time to be able to do that and to collaborate where she could. And she's actually where I had set this play was in the Michoacan area of Mexico, and um, she was from that area, and so I knew that she definitely had that knowledge in terms of music because I
Mhm.
wanted and I knew that she was going to bring an authentic sense to the music, and she even wrote a couple songs for it. Um, and yeah, so there was so many things that to be able to create with this, and even with this project, I got to find some great collaborators who I still work with,
Yeah,
who created the awesome costumes. If you see some of the costumes on my website, I think I have
they're
a few pictures.
gorgeous.
Um, yeah, like it's there was a lot built in there, but I wanted to create it in a way that could be done large with a big cast. But then I've also envisioned, I'm like, because it has these the mariposas, the butterflies in there.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? I've actually seen readings where some people have done where the mariposas aren't actually people, it's puppets. And I'm like, you know what? So it actually
Oh,
could be
that's
done
so smart.
smaller too, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so that's kind of was my
It's so
in into doing that and creating that
it's so
piece.
interesting. It's like it's just such a magical show. I feel like it's one of those ones that I read and I was like, I need to see this on
Oh my
stage.
gosh,
You know what I
it's
mean?
gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's just a gorgeous play to see. Well, I want to talk about one more thing before I let you go
Sure,
because I
sure.
was researching you and I read about the Royal Mexican Players and I thought it was one of the coolest groups I've ever read about. It seems so dope. That's such a great message. I want to tell us about it. Where did it start and what are you guys doing anything now?
Sure. Yeah. So we started in 2004, and really
Mhm.
it was a way to create uh, uh, it was a way to basically create the theater that we weren't seeing, in our own community, but
Yeah.
even on the American stage. And we were all based in Houston, and we realized, like, you know what, like we could do two things: we could complain, or we could do something about it.
Yeah.
And the idea was, how can we create something? So our first show that we created was a piece that I had been working on for years, which is called the Crazy Mexican Show, which is really just this,
Mhm.
just a bunch of scenes and monologues. And part of it was really just to kind of showcase the things that we felt would kind of showcase the funniness about being Latino, but also growing up in Houston.
Yeah.
Um, and what I think as we were creating, what we realized what we were also doing was creating an aesthetic of,
Mhm.
in terms of this group was, creating our own thing, telling our own story, and not just waiting for those opportunities.
Yeah.
Um, and
Creating
so
them yourself.
exactly, creating
Yeah.
them yourself. And that was and thankfully I found, there was five of us, and we just kind of found our group of like, this is what we're going to do. And the
Mhm.
idea wasn't, we weren't trying to create a theater season. We were just going to create a play, and then when it was ready, we would, but we also, our aesthetic was part of it, make it portable so that we can take it to community centers and
Yeah.
universities and high schools, and
Do it anywhere.
where do it anywhere, exactly, which is kind of the basis of, when you think of like the heart of Chicano theater, really was built on this. You would see, one example was, the on the flatbed trucks,
Mhm.
that was taken theater that was kind of taken anywhere.
Yeah.
um, and I felt like that would be something that has been part of our aesthetic. And I bring that up because then, years later, my wife and I, we moved to Milwaukee, and it's not like the group broke up, but it was that we kind of started doing things on our own. And because obviously
Yeah.
my wife and I were living together, we would continue to create on our own, still under that aesthetic, even creating our own opportunities. A one man show for me.
Mhm.
She created, she wrote a one woman show for herself. Um, but we even got busy individually, as me as a playwright, she as a not just an actress, but also a director and a voice coach,
Yeah.
which she gets hired to do a lot. And we still take that same aesthetic, and there are times that we were able to still work together. So I feel like even though the role mixing players as a group, as a, our own performance troupe,
Mhm.
isn't as the same thing as we were, we created this aesthetic that we still do. I mean,
That you've all brought out, and especially you within your work, you've brought out since then.
exactly. And so now,
Yeah.
like, I mean, my wife and I, thankfully, we still are able to work on projects together. We're working on our 18th project now, which is going to be an adaptation of Pam Munoz Ryan's Esperanza Rising.
Mhm.
Um, and we bring that same aesthetic of, making it in a way that, even though we know it's going to be produced in a big theater,
Mhm.
I write it in a way that it's going to be, that it could be portable if they wanted to tour it.
It could kinda go
Um,
back to your roots in that way.
exactly,
That's so awesome.
and also in a way that if, I don't know if she would want it, not for this one because she's going to direct it, but in a way that if she wanted to perform one of those characters, she could do that too. I mean, I almost every
Yeah.
time, even for me, just going back to Luchadora real quick, anybody who's ever read that play, the character El Hijo, I wrote for myself, and just in a way that, like, it doesn't require too much acting,
Yeah.
but some outlandishness. But I'm like, if there's ever time I go see it and they're like the actor just can't go on and be like, I
You
can
know
do
you can
it,
step
you
in.
know. And all of this has been informed by the aesthetic of, that idea that, you create these opportunities, you create that theater that you want to see.
Yeah.
And for me, but it's also about portability. I think there's something smart in that. Like, I mean, I appreciate the elements in terms of scenic design and all that, but
Mhm.
I also think the core of it is storytelling.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, so that this story can be told anywhere. Luchadora has been done in huge theaters, done at DePaul University, which is one of the biggest productions I've ever seen. Done at Seattle Children's, but it was
Mhm.
developed in a small black box at a community college in San Antonio,
That's
and
awesome.
which shows you that. I mean, for me, that's what's really important. Is I want to be able to create these stories that are
It's
portable
so
and
interesting to go
connected.
into your work with, like, 2 big things. You want it to be portable, but then you also wanna put something on stage that no one's ever seen before, and somehow you found the, like, perfect middle ground of that, and that's your work. It's so good. Alvaro, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Seriously, this has been a pleasure to chat with you.
Justin, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so glad I got to speak with you. And yeah, I mean, uh, let me know. I'll do this anytime, man.
No,
Thank you.
absolutely. We'll 100% have you back, dude. Thank you so, so much.